Hello everybody. I'm now going to attempt to teach everybody how to play the game Last Will. Last Will is a game with a theme that if you're born in America in the 70s or 80s, you probably saw a movie starring Richard Pryor called Brewster's Millions. And Last Will is basically the board game version of that movie. The premise is that we are all cousins, basically, and we had this really rich uncle right there. He spent his entire life earning money, died at his desk, and never was able to enjoy the money that he earned. So in his last will, he bequeathed all of his nieces and nephews a certain amount of money, and whoever can spend that money the fastest will win his entire fortune, and more importantly, win the game. So, how are we going to play? Well, it's got this really cool artwork, sort of, I think it's supposed to take place in England, which makes sense because they call the money pounds and not dollars. But this really cool artwork sort of has this Victorian England picture to it on the player boards and on the main board here. You're basically going to be spending money. Everyone starts with a certain amount. We're in this setup. I'm having everyone start with 70 pounds there and there. And you're going to be spending money mostly by playing cards. And there's different types of cards that we'll talk about. We have these white cards here that are events. You'll play cards like, like we go out to dinner, and that might have us spend 2 pounds. You see the 2 there. Anytime in this game, if you see a little red A, that means it costs you 1 action to do that. But we'll cover that in a second. So you have these events like going to the theater, going on a boat trip, going out to dinner. These are all events that you will do. You have properties that you can buy. There's different types of properties. There's townhouses and mansions, and there's another townhouse, and there's farms. There's 4 different types of properties, and you will buy them at a certain amount. You always buy them for this top amount, and then over time you can let that property depreciate and lose value turn by turn, because there is a little quirk in the game. You are not allowed to win the game if you own any property. So you can buy this property, hopefully at a very high amount, and then sell at a very low amount. But each property also has an upkeep fee. If you just want to get rid of $3 or 3 pounds, you can spend an action, and it will maintain this property, but then it does not go down in value that round. But we'll talk about that more in detail later. The other thing you can play these are called helpers and expenses. That's what these cards here are called, helpers and expenses. By playing these, for instance, they will often add cost to these other cards. So here you have the gardener. If you have the gardener and you own one of these 2 types of properties, when you maintain that property, well, you got to pay the gardener too. So instead of, let's say, we've got this townhouse here. To maintain your townhouse, normally it would, let's get into focus, would cost 3 pounds. But if you've got the gardener also, now to maintain that property, it's going to cost you 6 pounds. Because you'll notice the little orange property there, and this townhouse, a townhouse was an orange property. All right. So these cards are other examples. There's the gardener again. You can make reservations, standing reservations at a restaurant that will actually, round by round, you can just keep this out there. But these cards are other ways to spend money. And then finally, the final common type of card, because these 4 types of cards are called common cards, are companions. And companions are all one of 4 types. You have a guest, there's a chef, a horse, and a dog are the 4 types of companions. And it's kind of a neat mechanism. There are some events, for instance, going out to dinner. If you go out to dinner, it might cost you a certain amount of money, which is good. But if you bring your dog with you and your own chef and a horse, you play 3 of these cards with that card, it will cost you substantially more money. So that's basically how the meat of the game is going to be played, is through this card play. There are 2 different types of cards. White bordered cards are one and done. You play the card, and then it immediately goes into the discard pile, and it's done. Like the theater. Here's an example. For an action, you can spend £2 and go to the theater. But if you ride your horse to the theater, that's the little horse symbol there. So if you played this card with a companion card of a horse, it would add £3 to the cost, so you'd actually spend £5 to go to the theater. Even better. But it's a white bordered card, so one and done. And I think all of the events are white bordered cards. You also have black bordered cards. And black bordered cards, whether they're properties or helpers, will not get just one and done. You actually will play them to your player board, and they have ongoing effects. So for instance, if I want to buy this property, I would pay the £15, and then for an action, because you can see on your player board, there's a little action symbol again. It'll cost you 1 action. Boom, I now own that property. Okay. Throughout the course of the game, on your turn, you can also activate these cards, and you activate cards just by sliding them down to reveal the little check mark. And whenever you do that, whatever the symbol is beneath the check mark, that's what happens. So in this case, I activate a property. Well, I just spent $3 to maintain that property. And we'll talk about there's some more details with properties that we'll talk about in a second. But so white bordered cards, one and done. Black bordered cards get played to one of these areas here. You can always, let's say you don't like this. Wow, that's a bad example because it can't be a property. Let's say you've got this this gardener here on your player board, and you don't think the gardener's really doing it for you. Any non-property card you can always get rid of at any time. You can even, activate the gardener and then immediately discard him, put him over here in the discard pile to make room for more ongoing cards, because everyone starts with just 5 slots for their ongoing cards. And all the companion cards, these cards, they're slate bordered, they're not white or black. That's because these cards can never ever be played by themselves. They always have to be played sort of with another card, either an event, like I said, taking your dog out to dinner, or if some black bordered cards might have symbols on them. Here's a good example. You can go on a carriage ride, and if you activate going on a carriage ride, it'll cost you £1, but you can also bring a companion with you. There's that little pink symbol for a companion. So if you've got a companion card, there's the pink symbol right there. If you got that in your hand, you can play that card and then take a little pink token that represents companions. And for an action, see, there's a little action symbol, the A right there. Now you have a companion with you. So now every time you activate this card, it's £3 to go on the carriage ride, because you've got that companion just sort of waiting for you at the carriage at all times. And that's how the companion cards work. So that's the gist of the game. In terms of the overall goal, you have to be the first player to lose all of their money, and you cannot own any properties at the end of the game. So if you have a card, let's say you only have $2 left or £2 left, and you have a card in your hand that will allow you to spend £2, you're not allowed to play that card until after you've sold this property. All right, so you cannot go into bankruptcy as long as you have property. So that's just a little interesting rule you have to keep in mind. So how do you go about actually doing all this cool stuff? Well, The game is played over the course of 7 rounds. This is just a little round marker to keep track. Because if at the end of 7 rounds no one has gone bankrupt, then just the person with the least amount of money is declared the winner, because they got the closest to going bankrupt. So, how is it set up? Well, you start the game by everybody draws 3 property cards and 3 helper cards into their hand. And I've sort of set up, it's kind of a 2-player game, a purple player and a blue player. And I've drawn 3 of those cards. Here's 3 properties and 3 helpers. Or they're not just helpers, it's helpers and expenses. So, a training ground is an expense. And then here's 3 more for them. And you look through them and you pick 2 to keep. It can be 2 properties, it can be 2 helpers and expenses, 1 of each, doesn't matter. You pick 2 and then discard the rest. And you only do that on the first round. Then, after the game is all set up, you have what's called the setup phase. And the setup phase is you're going to get to see what some of these cards are. And what you do is look at what round we're on. We're on round number 1. And then you look in what's called the offering. These are the different cards that are going to come out during this round. And in rounds 1 through 3, the offering that goes here would be a property card. So we take a property card. Okay, so you're going to be able to buy that mansion. And then a helper/expense card is going to go there. Every single round, it's going to be a helper expense card that goes here. And this one is a companion card. A dog. Awesome. And then, so this bottom row is always filled by these common cards, but there's also these special crown cards. I forget their technical name, but every round, some of these cards are going to come out, and these are almost always more powerful than the common cards are. These cards will let you do much cooler things. And we see every single round, we take one that goes here. That's the old friend. He's going to give you an extra action each turn. And then every single round, another one comes here. The Breeders' Fair, an event. And in the first 3 rounds, one of these shows up. But you'll notice in rounds 4 and up, it has this special symbol where it is a wild card. And a wild card is basically this card, you can play it to serve as any one of the 4 companions. And actually, I made a mistake in a 2-player game. This 4th offering is always a wild card. Okay, so that is the setup. Setup phase. Then planning phase. Someone will get this first player marker. I think technically it's supposed to be the last person that spent money on something. And they will take their player token and determine in what order do they want to go. Because if you go really early, this would be the first person to go. You would then, this tells you what you will earn and how you can take your turn this round. And that is this will allow you to draw 5 cards from the common card decks, but you have to draw them all face down and then flip them all over. So you can't, for instance, draw a property card and say, ooh, if I can get a companion, that'll make that one better. So I'll go here next. No, you've got to draw all your cards face down. This tells you how many errands you're going to be able to send. There's this little mechanism about errand boys that you can take your little top hat and put it on various places on the board that will get you more of these cards and let you do some other cool things. So first player will get 5 cards, 2 errand boys, but then for the whole rest of the round, you can only take 1 action, okay? But you're going first. As you get further on down the track, the amount of stuff that you get tends to get a little bit better. For instance, if you just voluntarily go last, you're going to get to take 3 actions, which is pretty huge, and have 2 errands to run, but you only get to start with 2 cards and you're going last. So you've got to sort of determine what's more important to you on any given round, getting more cards, having more errands, having more actions, or going earlier versus later in the round. So once everyone has picked, and we'll have the blue player just say, and we're going to go there. Once everyone has determined player order and they've drawn their cards, so in this case the purple player would draw 2 cards, the blue player would have drawn just 1 card, then we start sending out our errand boys in turn order. So the purple player would send out his first errand boy, grab one of these little top hats, and these are the options for the errand boys. The first is you can go to these spaces here, basically anywhere where you see a little circle, you can put the errand boy on this player board. If you go to this spot, that means you want to take this card. This spot means you take this card. This spot, take this card, and so on. You'll notice I have this set up for a 2-player game. Along the top row of cards, these special awesome cards, there are only 2 spots for errand boys, but 3 cards to pick from. So if you pick one of these spots, you get your choice of any card up there, and then the second player to go would get their choice, because round by round, these cards do not carry over. They're wiped every round. So you can get a new card by sending an errand boy out. The other thing you can do is, it's an easy one, is you can just spend $2. You can go to the theater or send your errand boy to the theater. You go there, you just spend $2. Doesn't really help you for the rest of the round, but it's a way to just get rid of some money really fast. You can just draw a card at random, one of the common cards. And what you do there is you just put the errand boy over your color. So there's the purple space, so I put the purple errand boy there, and then if I were the purple player, I would then get to draw from one of the common decks up into my hand. This space here allows you to extend your player board. You have this looks a lot like this space here. So I go there and you grab one of these things and just set it up at the end of your player board. So now you have one more card slot where you can play cards. And then finally, this is kind of the most complicated thing because it relates to properties. If you go to this space here, you get to manipulate the value of the different types of properties. As I said, there's mansions, manors, farms, and one other type of property, but it's basically gold, brown, orange, and green. At the start of the game, these come out randomly, and these affect the price, the purchase and selling price of the different types of properties. So, if we look at our townhouse, which is the orange property, pick this up to get it into focus a little bit better. Excuse me. The purchase price of this townhouse, you look at the banknote at the top, is £15. But we have to look at the current value of the market there, and we find the orange, the townhouse, is at -3. So to purchase this, it would actually cost you 15, minus 3, which is 12. So to put this down on your player board, this round would actually only cost you 12. Well, obviously, depending on the cards that you have, you might want to change these numbers around, because there's a +3, a +1, a -3, and a -2. By sending your errand boy here, you're allowed to rearrange these tokens in any way you see fit. You could also theoretically put the errand boy there and change nothing just because you don't want your opponent to change the market, okay? Because obviously you want to buy properties at a very high value and sell them at a very low value. So for instance, if you had the gold type property in your hand which I think might be a mansion, I don't know. That would be really good right now because you could buy it for a very expensive price. And then maybe on a future turn, you send your errand boy here and you manipulate the market where you're going to just flip these around. And now when you sell your mansion, you really got hosed. You lost a lot of money on it. So that's what that action does for the errand boys. And I think that's all of the errand boy actions. Once everyone is done sending out their errand boys, so in this game, the purple player would get to do that twice because he chose this slot, which allows him to send out 2 errand boys. But the blue player, he would only get to send out 1 errand boy because there's only 1 top hat here. Then, in player order, they can start doing their actions. So we look at the purple player. He has 2 actions this round. So what he would do is on his player board, over here to the left, you have a little action counter. You would move this down to the number 2, okay? And of course at the start of the game, all of these would be blank. And then every action you take, you would just move that up until you ran out of actions. But then there are other cards, like the old friend. If you had him in your hand, it would cost you 1 action. Let's say you had him in your hand because you picked him up with an errand boy. An old friend shows up. It would cost you 1 action to put him down here because, see, it always takes an action to put a card here on your player board. So that would move this up. But you can activate your old friend to gain an action. And in the first time he comes out, that's basically just he goes out there for free, but on all future rounds, as long as you have your old friend, you get an extra action, which is pretty powerful. So, in player order, purple, and then if there were more players, maybe red, and then yellow, and then blue, you would play cards from your hand, spending action. So it costs an action to put a card down here, and the cards will always tell you if they cost an action or not. So for instance, the theater. If you have this in your hand, it would cost you an action to play it, but it would allow you to spend £2. If you got the horse with it, it would be £5 total. But that would cost you 1 action to play that card. Other cards don't necessarily cost an action to play them. But that'll be indicated on the card. So let's talk about some of the cards specifically. Like I said, properties. We'll take a look at this townhouse again. Whenever you build a property, you take one of these little property tokens and you put it on that top value. Okay? Because at the end of the round, if you have not spent the upkeep money, like if you didn't want to spend an action to activate that and spend $4, if at the end of the round this card has not been activated, the value of the property depreciates and you move it down. And then if on a future turn you have not activated the card, it depreciates even further. So that way when you do sell it, because you have to sell all your properties before the end of the game, you'll sell it at a nice low price. That's how properties work. Also, earlier I said you can always, like say you don't want the old friend anymore. At any time for free, you can just get rid of him. You can always remove cards. You can't do that with properties. Properties have to be sold following that depreciation rule and making any adjustments based on the current market. So, and I believe it always takes an action to sell a property. But I'll double check that. So, what are some of the other cards? Well, here's a reservation. It can be a standing reservation. And on your turn, you can activate it to spend $1. But also on your turn, you see there's this little chef hat. You could spend an action, and if you had a chef card in your hand or the wild card in your hand that serves as any companion, you could spend an action to grab these are the tokens that represent your companions, to grab a chef token and add him, and then you could spend another action if you had another chef card to put 2 chefs. So basically you get a reservation at a restaurant and then you hire 2 private chefs to come with you. That's really expensive. So now when you activate it, because activating this card does not cost an action. You notice there's no little A right up here. So now whenever you activate this card, you would actually spend $4 to maintain that reservation instead of 1. And all the other cards work in a similar way. You can activate them. Sometimes it's free to activate them, sometimes it's not. There are cards that will say if you spend, say, 2 actions to activate a card, then that might cost you $6. But if you spend 6 actions to activate the card, that'll cost you $30 or something like that. If you look at the back of the rule book, it gives you very detailed instructions as to what the symbols mean. So, you on the different helpers and what the different expenses mean. The little A means use 1 action to spend £4. If there's a number on the helpers, if there's a number, that means that's how many times you can do it per round. If there's no number, that just means whenever you do the action associated with it, you get to do this. So 1 times farm, money, no action. So once per round, you may activate a farm without using an action. So that's cool. Normally it costs you an action to activate your farm. If you've got a helper with this symbol on it, you no longer have to spend an action to activate the farm. And you just go round and round after that. At the end of the round, you sort of have a cleanup phase where you depreciate. If you have not activated your properties, it's still like that. You never activated the property. You would depreciate the value. You would then clear out all these cards that were not purchased. And what else do you do at the end? Oh yeah, you have to discard your hand down to 2. You can only carry 2 cards into the start of each round. So you discard down to 2, you depreciate your properties, you reset the cards, bring out the new cards, reset, any cards that you activated down here, you bring them back up here. You would then return any markers and figures. Basically, the errand boys and everything, you take them back. You take all these things back. And then you would move the round counter like that. And then the first player token would rotate to the left. So now in the next round, the blue player gets to decide what they want to do. So that's basically how to play. I probably skipped over a few things, and there's a few things you might have to look up. But that gives you the idea of how the game works. It sounds like a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video, and hey, maybe we can even sit down and play Last Will.